Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Crypto with English. For anybody in this space, it's very apparent that Miami, if it isn't
Mhm.
already, is going to be the next Silicon Valley of the United States. And there is an incredible array of just projects coming out of this one city in this one region of South Florida. So I have the distinct honor of introducing Olivia Ramos, the CEO and founder of deepblocks. So for anybody who's very much into real estate and tech, you're hearing terms like smart cities, for instance, and there's projects going on all over the world. And here in the US, it seems to be emerging out of Miami. So, Olivia, thank you very much for joining me on today's episode. I think your platform and your project may really transform real estate investing as a whole. With everything that I've read, as far as your biography and everything regarding the features of the project that you're doing with Deep Blocks, I am genuinely blown away. So if you could introduce
Thank you.
yourself briefly, anytime, if you could introduce yourself briefly and kind of provide a preamble of Deep Blocks and how you came up with this idea.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with you and for
Thank
you
you.
to have interest in our work and to have this conversation. So, deepblocks is in essence a software where you can canvas entire markets in minutes. That means you can look at a city and ask the city a question, specifically, for example, where can I build 200 units? And there's currently less than 2,000 square feet of building. So the software scans every single property. It already understands for every single property what the potential development is and what's existing, and it generates a short list of properties that meet that requirement. That's the first aspect of the software. This is something that takes months of work, many analysts
I
to
can
to
only
come
imagine.
together and canvas a city, and we do it in minutes. And that's we're very proud of that. The software also allows you to select the property, look deeper into the property, and it generates an automatic 3D model and financial model. So you could do the due diligence and preliminary feasibility also in a short amount of time. This usually takes weeks of work with multiple disciplines, getting architects to get back to you, looking at zoning codes.
Right.
This can happen in a couple of minutes as well.
Wow. Well, I have to say, growing up as a kid, enjoying movies like Blade Runner and Fifth Element and things along those lines, seeing something like this really makes me feel like we're truly living in the future. This is going to turn real estate on its head, and by the way, I mean this in a good way. It's flipping the script as far as real estate investing, and I guess you could say going through the process of researching and acquiring information on zoning and land values and things like that. What was the inspiration behind this project? Because this is very ambitious, and by the way, I can only imagine the difficulty in just creating the, let's say, the initial MVP and doing beta testing, for something like this. So tell me about that process.
Absolutely. So the process started at Singularity University. I was at the Global Solutions program, and it's super intense, and they give you information on all the exponential technologies and all the global grand challenges. And my background is in architecture and real estate, so I fit into the global grand challenge of cities and housing and shelter. So then I had a partner at the time, Bernard Leon. He was from Singapore, and he was really interested in lowering the cost of living. And he thought that by lowering the cost of housing, that could be done. So I thought, well, let me at least do a whiteboard of how real estate development works. And I did this giant whiteboard, everything from site analysis all the way to construction administration, who's involved, how are they connected, what's the
Right.
logic. And he looked at it and he said, well, there are these weak points, but all of it is indeed connected, and therefore an AI system can do the whole thing. And when he said that, I knew that this would be my life passion, and to create a single system that takes this process that sometimes can take years to
Yeah.
refine what it is to build, not just where to build, but what to build and what's appropriate and efficient and affordable and sustainable. This could be done in seconds, essentially. That's what we're going for.
Wow. And so far, how many cities have you mapped out with deep blocks? Because I was on the website last night. It almost looks like you have half the country mapped out, so to say.
No. So no,
But it's a lot. But it's a
they're
lot.
it's a lot. It's a lot, but
Right.
there are almost 20,000 municipalities in the U.S. That's a lot. We've digitized 100 cities, 100 municipalities. There's still a lot of work to do. 100 municipalities are live. We have an additional 30 that are now being uploaded. But the beauty about what we do is we're using machine learning through the process, increasing the intelligence of those models in order to further and further automate the process of zoning extraction. Right now, even with just 100 cities, we're the largest digitized zoning data provider. Yes, it's a yeah. We're the largest holder of digitized zoning data. So this is something that hasn't been done before, and a really interesting application we can do on top of that is normalize zoning across these cities, across the country. So then you could say, where can I build industrial? And although industrial is set in 50 different ways across all municipalities, you can find those sites instantly across all 100 cities.
Right.
We're hoping to be in 700 cities by the end of 2023 with the help of machine learning. So it's a big, it's we aspire to have the entire country eventually, but it's a long way to go.
Right. And if you could be so kind, for the viewers out there, and I'm getting some DMs right now, would you mind explaining what machine learning is, especially because this is a term that's thrown out very common, very frequently in tech news and tech coverage?
Yes. So machine learning is the process of training a training us, let's say, uh, training an algorithm to understand the relationships between data points. So if you can generate, if you can design an algorithm yourself, you don't need machine learning. But if you have many fields or many streams of data, and you want to find the correlation between them. So I'll give you an example.
Sure.
So we want to figure out what residential rates or multifamily rates per square foot are in any census tract. But we only have this data in, let's say, 20 cities, or we only have the manpower to collect this data in 20 cities. We can train the machine to understand the relationship between demographic data and rents. And so we give it, this is the demographic data and this is the rent in all those, 20 cities, hopefully a lot more, but just to
Right.
for the sake of example. Then it is trained to understand, it generates its own algorithm to input demographic data and output rent, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
when you give it a demographic data point from any other city, it will give you an output, right? Now that's very simplified, right? So it's a very simple way to see it. You want to give it a lot more things than just a simple input and to get a simple output. We want to give it construction costs, land values, anything that it can then strengthen that algorithm so that you have more certainty of that output, which is dollar per square foot. So essentially is a way to design an algorithm that you can't just do on a whiteboard, that there are too many correlations for
Right.
this algorithm to be designed by a person.
Right. By the way, that is a very good explanation, and that is a great example of machine learning. So thank you very much for that. So with deep blocks, could you kind of laundry list the parameters, so to say, when I guess you could say using this software? So I guess we're talking about probably zoning codes and ordinances, for instance, probably like a average of rents in the locality, so to say, probably things like uh, I guess you could say the local taxes, so to say, real estate taxes and things like that. So, if I was to use this I guess you could say, this product right now, and I, let's say, wanted to figure out the next spot worth investing in, as far as real estates, whether I wanted to build, let's say, condos, apartments, or something like that, what information will this provide to me when I'm using deep blocks?
Yes, great question. So there are two aspects to that. One is deciding where to invest, and two is deciding what to build there. So the first part is we're getting really good at this first part, which is saying what are the areas in these cities that have, for example, a land constraint, which
Right.
means
Like some sort of
most of it
covenant,
has.
or like I'm sorry, go on.
No, no, it simply means most of the land has been built out already.
Okay,
So,
got it.
so there are less opportunities. You can imagine something like Manhattan has fewer
Right,
opportunities to
right.
develop than Homestead, Florida, right? So then we're first using zoning data to find these opportunities for land compression, which means this is an opportunity to buy like immediately. There's a lot
Wow.
of competition. There's an increase in population. There's an increase in land value. There's an increase in it. There's been a history of construction leading up to this point, and those data points haven't been put together before, especially in combination with zoning, which gives you that land compression
Okay. Yeah,
component.
right.
So, for example, you might say, well, there hasn't been a lot of construction there lately, but the reason is there's barely any land left. So, whatever you build, it actually lowers the risk of investing in that area.
Wow.
So, these are the conversations that we want to have with the data that we've digitized, and we're putting that together for large players that want to grow across cities and find these opportunities of potential next boom markets. We also are looking at history. I'm digressing a little bit. I
No,
want to
please.
answer your
No, this is
question.
great. No, this is great. Please.
So we want to study this data 50 years back, maybe
Right.
even in some cases 100 years back, and say what happened that made Soho Soho, what happened that made Miami Beach Miami Beach, and
Wow.
then be able to find those same patterns and predict the next boom markets. But we think zoning data is crucial for that. So in terms of
Absolutely.
what you get with our software is you're able to look at this data. You're able to look at an area. Let's say now you've identified an area of interest. It's the census tract that has this land compression, has this combination
Right.
of data points that you understand as valuable, and you know everybody will have their own thesis on investment. But let's say you understand this is an area, and then you can ask the city, well, in that area, there's maybe 10,000 properties. Which one fits my development criteria?
Right.
So then the software scans those depending on your query, and it gives you those handful of sites that
Wow.
meet your development criteria. That's the part that would take many months to go through one at a time, understand depending on land size, what's existing, what's the zoning. I mean, some developers do this. They literally have a team and they do one by one and canvas that
Right.
entire area. So we do that already. It's done in months. And so you have a short list, and then you generate different scenarios on that and see what would be what can you pay for that for it to make
Right.
sense. What do you build and at what price would it make sense, and are those assumptions reasonable? So in terms
Wow.
of what's included, because you mentioned taxes, you mentioned income, you mentioned, so on that project level, it's a back of the envelope, and the assumptions that go into a back of the envelope is super simple. It's income minus expenses minus vacancies is net operating income. You divide that by the cost of the project, which includes the land cost, the construction cost,
Wow.
and the soft cost, and you have your return on cost. And the return on cost is different than an internal rate of return. The internal
Right.
rate of return takes you over a long period of time. Let's take a 10-year projection, but a return on cost is a 1-year snapshot. And it's really a way to filter through a lot of options and a lot of properties without too many predictions on the future. It's just saying, how do these compare in a 1-year snapshot? And then you can make a better decision on site selection, which is probably the most important thing in development.
Wow. And excuse me, for the viewers out there, I cannot reiterate more how much time this project saves for any individual or company trying to get into real estate investing. These processes, like Olivia said, take months. And even those processes alone, it is very easy to miss some of these minor details, which have very, very big impacts when essentially coming up with values and ascertaining where the next real estate market boom will be. So I have to ask you, Olivia, with this kind of project, why did you decide to go the entrepreneurship route? Why did you decide to create your own company? And the reason why I ask this, because having a product and a project like this, I would imagine it would be very easy for you to, let's say, join a larger company and, for kind of, as some sort of executive and kind of just, for lack of a better term, just kind of put your feet up on the desk and be like, okay, I made something great. I can just kind of coast from here. Whereas, the entrepreneurship journey, other than this, you have to worry about so many other things at the same time too. So I'm kind of wondering what was your thinking and what was your journey so far?
That's a super interesting question. And, everything that we build has to help an existing need, has to solve an existing problem. The existing problem is speed. People need to be faster, more efficient. We're
Yeah,
making analysts 10x as productive. This is a fact. And we need to do that in order to continue to have momentum towards a moonshot. But being an entrepreneur allows you to have a moonshot in the first place. And what
yeah.
we want to do is an AI that uses, for example, biomimicry techniques to understand exactly what would be the most efficient or the most affordable or the most sustainable product for any specific part of any city. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're in Miami. In Miami, mangroves are the optimal type of tree for the coast, right? Because it protects the fish, it protects the birds from hurricanes, it sucks up toxins, it could live on water. It's like this ideal city in this type of environment. Maybe our buildings should be modeled like mangroves, and maybe we should
Oh,
allow, we're all afraid of sea level rise, and
right.
it's really just we're going back to what it was before. It was, this whole thing was a swamp. So through biomimicry we can generate optimal building solutions that are off the grid, sustainable, and
Wow.
safe to the specific environment. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen anytime soon, right? This is a
Right.
dream that many other people will pick up, and I think that's where we're essentially moving towards. And we can only move in that direction, whether we actually get there or not, or just inspire the next group of entrepreneurs to get there, if we're entrepreneurs ourselves,
Right.
or if we partner with a big company that has similar goals of extreme sustainability and extreme efficiency in the way we build our cities.
Right. So I have a question from that. So could this technology detect and deduce, let's say, vulnerabilities to, like, let's say, natural disasters in cities, just kind of based on what you're talking about? So I'm thinking, actuaries might want to take a look at this technology as well. So talking about the comparison between, mangroves and kind of the ecosystem of Miami and modeling buildings off of that, which I think is a great idea. Could this also detect which areas of, let's say, Miami or any other city could be more susceptible to things like hurricanes or flooding or anything like that?
Yes. So our technology, I think of our technology as like a marketplace where something like that can be plugged into. So in order to understand how susceptible we are to a hurricane, we need to understand our infrastructure.
Right.
And for example, that's not a layer that we currently have today. And in some cases, that layer is not available for security measures. You don't want a potential attacker to understand where all your infrastructure is. So
Good point. Right.
not all of that is available to the public, but I think there are ways to collaborate with municipalities and to collaborate with cities to model the future strains of an infrastructure. If we continue to build in these areas and there's some kind of minor infrastructure mishap or collapse, these will be the consequences. And
Right.
therefore, these are potential solutions to make sure that the people and the surroundings and and everything around it is safe during a time like that. In my personal opinion, I think understanding that can promote R&D towards sustainability,
Right.
right? And in my opinion, it's about making buildings autonomous and able to detach from that infrastructure. Because if there is such a collapse, then it's a crisis at that point, and we've seen
Right.
that in other cities. But
Yeah.
right now, we can begin to find inefficiencies in the zoning where we can tell cities this area will not attract any investment because the return based on the zoning, the way it's been designed, does not allow for the proper development. And this you've seen this in, for example, Wynwood. Wynwood was rezoned the entire
Right.
area
Yeah, that's
because you
right.
couldn't make any money on that particular D1 zoning or D2 zoning. So everything was turned into T5. And that's just like maybe too detailed, but it's an example of how studying this at a large scale can help cities increase productivity and bring in investments because they can guarantee with zoning that those people, those investors will make a profit on
Wow.
development.
So, I have a question too. So, using this technology, and correct me if I'm wrong if I'm using the proper terminology. So, if I was a real estate investor, could this technology also tell me whether I need to seek a variance or not? So, let's say if I'm looking to acquire a property, or if I already have a property, and if I want to, let's say, increase its value, could it? Could I guess you could say, derive that from the information that this project tells me? So I'm like, okay, I have this building in such and such district. However, if I get this variance, it's going to give me like a better view of maybe, let's say, the ocean or downtown or something like that. Could I use the technology to, let's say, figure that out or ascertain that?
So right now the technology includes the base zoning layer. So
Okay.
the what you can do by right. And it also and it's now beginning to include overlays and bonuses and
Right.
things like that. However, the technology allows you to explore anything. So
Wow.
it doesn't limit you to those zoning restrictions because we learned that early on. We at first limited and then they were like, no, 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 there's so much room for negotiation.
Right.
And depending on what I bring to the community, I might be able to get a certain amount of increase in FAR or increase in density. For example, the city of Miami has a great program where you could double your density if you bring in certain percentages of affordable housing. So these are things that could be studied with our software. And the
Yeah.
important part about that is you could do rapid prototyping on these variances or things that are allowed by warrant or by exceptions so that you know whether it's worth it or not to go into that conversation with a municipality.
Got it.
Sometimes you think that's what you want. You spend 6 months just having a conversation and you realize there was a way to do it by right that didn't
Oh, okay.
require, all of
Right.
that back and forth.
Awesome. So I just got another DM from a viewer right now, and he's asking, the mapping. How are you able to map the cities?
Yeah, so a lot of municipalities have parcel level data
Okay.
because they use that to do taxes and appraise property values for tax purposes. So this and also there has to be a centralized record of what are the boundaries of each property. So that's in one place. In another place, you have the zoning documents. And those are PDFs, and we've trained a team, and we're using machine learning to extract that information so that we can layer that on top of the parcels. And we also layer opportunity zones, market rates, locations of businesses and schools and things like that. And we want to bring in hundreds of layers. We're collaborating with a team that's doing permitting data, and that's the only thing they do. So we are a place for them to be able to integrate it into a larger set. But we use QGIS, which is an open source mapping software, to be able to combine these layers. For a long time, we've been using Mapbox, where soon moving into our own backend mapping infrastructure. But there are great tools out there to explore geospatial information, and we've used it all to kind of bring it together and build our own software.
Awesome. And I have another DM from a viewer. She's asking, this looks fascinating. Just curious, what is biomimicry?
Awesome. So biomimicry is the studying natural processes or natural architecture and then seeing how that could be applied to materials or to buildings. We haven't seen that too much in architecture in the way I'm thinking about it. I'll give you a quick example.
Right.
I have a friend in a lab in Israel, and they were wondering why a bird nest did not have any bacteria inside the nest. So they're trying to
Oh,
figure
wow.
out, was it the way it was built? What kept these, like, tiny birds safe from bacteria? And they realized it came from the structure of the saliva itself. So the saliva has a labyrinth-like structure that doesn't allow the bacteria to get to the other side. So they're now generating like different plastics or different types of materials with that structure, which would allow for really safe environments that would be deterred by bacteria. So it's understanding these systems, teaching an AI essentially how to you know how to build with that system, like what is the logic behind that system, and then creating new products based on that logic.
Wow. Awesome. And I have another viewer asking, she's asking, I really enjoy this. I really enjoyed this so far. Um, if I was to get into blockchain and real estate, where would I start? Courses or certifications, etc.
So there's a lot going on in blockchain and real estate right now, and I'm glad that was brought up. And it really depends on what the interest is. Real estate has so many different disciplines within it. So are you interested in design? Are you interested in the security of things? For example, now we're putting titles in the blockchain. And when we do that, we're not going to need title insurance because
Right.
it's safe. And the whole idea about bringing blockchain technology into real estate is making it safe, making it secure, trusting that when you do a transaction, that transaction is final and recorded and accessible, and nobody can change it. So it really depends. I would find what your passion is in real estate, and where blockchain is being implemented, and learn as much as possible. But it's in a lot of ways is fairly new in terms of like actual implementation, not in terms of technology. And so it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Right. And as far as your journey, Olivia, you have a very fascinating background. So could you talk about your time at Columbia University and some of the things you did afterwards?
Yeah, so Colombia was amazing. It was, I learned more about solving problems at a massive scale, more than I did actual architecture. And really, you had the choice. I'm sure there are a lot of people who really learned a lot of architecture, but I focused on large systems, urban systems, and that was my passion, and it gave me a platform to take classes and to have those conversations. When I graduated, I realized that the architect did not make a decision on the projects.
Oh,
So I was super upset because I had spent, 7 years in,
right.
4 years in undergrad, 3 years in grad, and it didn't occur to me that the developer made all the decisions. So I decided to get a second master's in real estate development so that I
Very
can,
nice.
gain this power of making decisions on what to build.
Right.
So I went and did a second master's at the University of Miami. I knew Miami was the place where I wanted to work, so I thought it would be a great combination to do the master's there. And here I worked in development and construction and architecture, in brokerage, and I really just wanted to put it all together. I wanted to do it all myself.
Yeah.
And right before I was about to get investment for my first development project, which I was super happy about, I got accepted to the DARPA Innovation House with the Department of
Wow.
Defense. to design big data navigation software, and they were so confused by our application that they let us go in. But it changed my world in terms of what was available in technology. It was a focus around big data. And after that, I realized I was never going to do architecture in its conventional sense, that there was something really important in the technology and the big data and the ability to streamline and optimize our processes.
Wow. And, going through this program and afterwards, were there any architects or designers in this space that particularly influenced you to pursue this?
So I mean, so Rem Koolhaas is one of my favorite architects, and forever he's had a side office that was about experimenting with generative design and I've always been a big fan of architects that have tried to move towards technology and to use technology. Um, so yeah, I could see that. I think it's mostly been used on the side of aesthetics, and maybe a lot of people
Sure.
would be against what I'm saying right now. That's my opinion. I think in the way I'm thinking about it in terms of biomimicry, it's really on the internal workings of a building, less so
Got it.
than the external expression of the
Right.
building.
Right. Got it. That is that's incredible. So, when putting together, this project, uh, did you foresee that Miami was going to be the new, you could say, Silicon Valley, or really the tech ecosystem of really the future of the United States, whether it's, Web3, blockchain, and everything else coming out of that? Because, I speak with other, colleagues in this space. I'm not shocked, but some of them are, especially if they're, based out of Palo Alto and San Francisco or even New York City. I don't know if it's a hubris or something like that. But for some people, it seems like it's kind of taken them off guard. My thinking was, because I used to live in South Florida, why not Miami earlier, so to say? So I kind of wanted to know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I think it's been a really nice, maybe not surprise, but a really nice event at how quickly we've gotten to this point.
Yeah.
And when I moved from Silicon Valley to Miami, we moved deepblocks to Miami in 2017, uh, you had a bunch of investors being like, unless you move to Silicon Valley, we can't invest in you.
Wow.
Or, Miami companies were valued way lower than Silicon Valley companies. It's still the case in many ways, but um, the last, I guess, 5, 7 years have seen a huge transformation. There's been a lot of investment
Yeah.
in the city. Before this boom, there's been a lot of investment in infrastructure for entrepreneurship and co-working spaces and funding for training and funding for programs to help entrepreneurs have the vocabulary, have the network, and that's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
And it's been a really great to see. And now that there's this tons of influx of capital because of COVID, because it's Florida, because it's just an amazing place to live, there's the infrastructures in place to allow for this capital to be put to good use.
Wow. And what I keep hearing from individuals who are moving down to Miami, especially from colder areas like New York City, Boston, things like that, it's really the work-life balance. You have the nice weather, you have the beaches, you have the nightlife, and you also have the things to do, during the day. So, especially coming from colder areas, it seems like you can have an equal, if not greater, success down there while also being healthier at the same time too. You can go cycling all year. You can do all different types of athletic activities all year around and things like that. So, I'm very happy to see the success of Miami and kind of the new frontiers it's achieved as well. And it's not just Palo Alto anymore. It's not just New York City. There's other rich ecosystems out there, and we're seeing it unfold before us right now. So we all know the entrepreneur's journey can be very, very difficult. It can be isolating. It can be frustrating. It can be stressful. So if you can kind of go through, what were some of the low points when trying to assemble this great project together, and then in contrast, what were some of the high points?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of lessons. that we had to learn, and I love sharing them because
Oh,
if
thank
I
you.
knew those before, I would
I
have
feel the same way, right?
expedited our success. Lesson number one is, when you have an idea, and it could be a transformational idea, the only people that will invest in you are people who really understand the market, especially early on. At least that was our experience. So we spoke with 100 investors before we got our first yes. And that, I think, it's a low point. Like, you have this idea, you think it's going to change the world, and one after the other, 100 times, it's a no. And you're just like, what is going on? Like, I really believe in
Right,
this. So you also have to have this sense of, like, I'm going to do this no matter what, in any way or form. I'm going to make this happen. And if you don't have that, and if you don't think that this is what you're meant to do, and this is, if you don't do this, you're going to be super upset with yourself and life, you're
right,
not going to get through those 100 no's until you find that yes. And we realized that the yes came from people who understood real estate development. And that's not a lot of people, and certainly
right,
it's not everyone that has capital to invest. So
right.
now we like narrowed down. We're only speaking with investors that have a background in real estate, or funds that
That's
have
good.
LPs in real estate. And then we raised the first million much faster after that, once we realized that.
Wow.
So I think lesson number one and low point number one was, how do we get the right investors for this? And
That's a good
how
question,
to,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one. The other one is making a team and understanding what your values are. Like, there are tons of talented people that are not a good fit for your day to day, your style of your personal style. And we have a team that we're all on the same page about transparency, honesty, over communication. We're here to solve a problem. We're able to have critical dialogues, and that's, we protect that above all. So
Right,
we've had a few cases, super talented people that just were not a good fit,
right,
were maybe had a more competitive edge within the team, rather than a collaborative edge. So things like
right,
that
right.
became really important, because one bad seed in that ecosystem can ruin the entire vibe, and productivity will fall, and it's just like, it could domino. We've
I
had a
c
few of those low points where we've had to, like, we need to get rid of this person, and just it's just
right,
not a good fit.
right. I think the founding team and having a really a cohesive unit of like shared values and really compatible personalities is particularly important. So during this process, what were some of your proudest moments? Like, what were some of the moments, like specific moments you reached where like, okay, this can really work. This is coming to life right now. Like, I guess you could say, what were some of the signs, so to say, that you were going in the right direction?
Well, I mean, raising money is always a good validator.
Yeah,
And I know there are a lot of startups that bootstrap and do it from their own money and don't want investments. But for me, getting investment is, it's other people are trusting that you're on the right path.
right.
So when
That's very good
we
points.
every time we raise more money is one of those moments where, like, okay, we're still on the right path. People still believe in our moonshot and believe in what we've built so far. And every step of building the software. I mean, my background is not in computer engineering, so, like, really having to communicate with an engineering team, and have this vision come to life. Every feature that we make, everything that we put together, and it works, and people use it and they find it valuable, is one of those moments. And
Right,
those are the best.
right. And it kind of makes me wonder, when it comes to real estate and real estate investing, um, how come there aren't more projects like this out there? And by the way, this is totally anecdotal, but looking for something comparative here, I don't see it out there. Like, for instance, so, what you're doing, in my mind, really stands out a lot. So, if you can kind of maybe, shed some light on that, so to say, like, I would imagine that your project and these type of things would have like already been the status quo. So to say, is the real estate industry kind of in some ways a slow moving machine when it comes to technology? Is it kind of like are there legacy systems in there, so to say, that people are still kind of hesitant to move out of or adapt away from?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. There's a lot going
Okay.
on. One, the industry, it seems to be or has been historically based on a bunch of verticals. And each vertical has its own degrees and its own language and their own
Mm,
software. So I think combining everything
right.
is not super intuitive, maybe. We did it because I've been obsessed and I got multiple masters and I worked in all the disciplines and I've been obsessed about combining it all into one thing
Right.
for 25 years. So I think the original intention of a founder makes a big difference in terms of what the product ends up being. There's also a lot of
Right.
pressure for technology to be really, really good at one thing. And even with us, we've
That's a good
had
point. Yeah.
to kind of figure out, like, after everything we've built, what is this one thing that can take us to the next level? Even
Right.
though we want this AI to do the whole thing, like for us is you can canvas an entire market in a minute. Like that's the thing we're
Right.
really good at. But it's taken us a long time to be like, okay, let's just do one thing really, really well. Luckily, that thing encompasses everything that we want to put together. But there's the two things. Like it's
Right.
hyper, like fragmented, and also pressure to do one thing really well. Otherwise, you're not going to do anything. And we've kind of bypassed both of those things, and we're
Wow.
able to combine a lot of things that like normally people wouldn't think about combining.
Right, and I think you put it better. I guess what I was trying to say was I haven't seen really other startups and other companies combine all of those aspects and attributes the way you have, so to say. So thank you for answering, answering that. So like I said, I am beyond like impressed, and I'm very curious to see how how great this project is going to play out. So I was kind of wondering, what is your personal philosophy? Because I would imagine with this project and how relatively visible you are, because from what I've seen, in my research, there must be a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in architecture, who may be coming up to you at various points. Maybe you're looking for some sort of mentorship, or at least just asking advice. Could you share some of those moments and experiences and what you have kind of told people?
Hmm. I'm trying to think. I mean, when I speak at conferences and stuff, I do get students that come up to us, and we actually have a summer internship every summer. We've had over 40 interns now
Very
of
nice.
aspiring entrepreneurs in whether it's tech or the industry or just understanding startups. I think, everybody wonders like, what does it take to start my own thing?
Yeah.
What does it take to bring this idea to life? And I think it just takes like being upset enough that it doesn't exist. If you're trying to bring something to market that, and that's another point that I wanted to make earlier, is you have to make sure there's a market that wants to buy this, that you're solving a real problem. So
Good points.
I always tell them that, like, make sure that the problem is real and people are willing to pay for you to solve that problem. That is
Right.
not just in your head, because that could
Right.
happen a lot. Like, oh no, this is a moneymaker. People are
Yeah.
gonna love this. Everyone
Right.
is gonna love this. And I'm like, no,
Right.
no, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, those are very few cases. Like, you have to go out there and experiment and ask people, if you had this, how much would you pay for it? Like, very cold. So
Wow.
understanding that there's a market for your idea, being upset enough that even if you lost, even if you didn't make it happen, will you still try?
Right.
Like, it has to be something that you're really upset about. Otherwise, it's not going to take you through the hard times. You're just going to be like, well, I'll just try something else.
Right.
So those two things are super necessary. And yeah, and if you're a true entrepreneur, you're not going to be able to hold a job. Like, I was never able to hold a job for more than 6 months. I just
But
can't.
you, but you know what? From what I know about you in this interview, I would imagine that I think a lot of traditional jobs probably aren't interesting or stimulating enough at the very least, because many jobs they become monotonous and almost robotic over time. And I think if you have all of these ideas and all of these, ambitions, kind of being kind of nailed to a desk all day, it's not the greatest use of your time or potential. So trust me, I totally get it. Seriously. And, in fact, with these kind of ideas, you're somebody who deserves to really be an entrepreneur, doing your own thing and creating things instead of just kind of, you could say, going through the motions, each day. And that is the case with many blockchain leaders who've come on the show, and that's exactly what they've said. They said, your traditional jobs, I just can't stand it. I need to do something. I need to make something. I need to figure out things for myself, and actually have the moving parts in my hands and kind of interact with those. So I think that's very, very enlightening, and in fact, that's a common theme I come across. And by the way, I share the same exact sentiment regarding that too. So trust me. I even feel personally like over time, like I remember other jobs I had, I feel like I kind of had to fake it for a while. So I'm like, I have to kind of pretend,
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, yeah, this is fine, so, don't show too much like frustration or maybe, or discontent, on my face. But it's like, I need to do something on my own, and that would be the recurring theme. I tell myself, I'm like, this isn't enough. I need to be moving. I need to be doing something faster or more. I guess you could say more engaging than this.
Well, and I think that's something to think about as the company grows and you begin to employ more and more people, that you want to make sure that you don't produce the kind of environment that you couldn't stand in
Right,
your corporate
right.
job. And so I make sure everyone on the team is working on things they've never done before. They
That's
have to
good.
figure it all out. They have to come up with solutions and fight through it. And that's almost like every position on our team is an entrepreneur position, because this
That's
hasn't been
great.
built before. It hasn't been put together before. So you need to figure it out, because that's
Right,
there's no other way to build it.
right,
So I think if corporations would think that way and allow people to disrupt within, that I mean, then entrepreneurship wouldn't be as popular,
right.
probably.
No, very well said. And I have to wonder too. So I would imagine on this journey, putting together deep blocks, there had to have been a line or a group of naysayers you've met along the way who are saying, Olivia, what are you doing? This project couldn't possibly go anywhere. This is way too abstract, out of the box for most people. You're wasting your time. I can imagine you've come across like those kind of individuals. And by the way, often these could be family, friends, you know, colleagues. So I was wondering, do you have any stories that kind of touch upon that? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, they almost always have like one or two very, very fascinating stories, and often it was somebody close to them who are kind of almost like, yeah, you really shouldn't be doing this. So I'm kind of wondering if that's the case on your end.
Well, I have two. I don't want to say who it was.
Right.
I don't
No
want to
names, of
embarrass
course.
anybody,
Right.
but like I
Yeah.
have two short stories
Okay.
that fit that. One is when we just started. There were a series of people we really admire that said, "Well, you're just going to make developers richer," and
Oh,
that was one of the biggest, which is one a validation for the business.
right. I was gonna say that's kind of a
But
left-handed compliment, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
but we had to prove that this technology can also generate optimal housing for even informal housing, to
Right.
optimize even the simplest of structures with best lighting, best harnessing of the resources around it. And that's where we want to go. So we had to prove that. And that became a really good way to build vocabulary on our vision. But
Right.
that was a harsh one to hear. And another one was I was offered a job at a university doing research. It was a really luxurious position. I was like, well, I have a full-time job. And they were like, no, 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 but this other company is already doing that. Like, kind of drop it. And
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, no, this is different. This is
Right.
different. And this is, you know, I need to give this a chance. So there was a lot of talks of like, this already exists. This already exists. Like one, and that's hard for an entrepreneur to be like, and you have to prove why you're different. And we have proved how we are different.
Wow, that's great. And for deep blocks, what are some of the current and upcoming projects that you all are working on? Of course, what you're comfortable, discussing anyway.
Yeah, no, no. So we've decided to always be an open book. Like our demo is open to anyone to see. We have webinars every week, live webinars for everyone to see the software. We're not afraid to show what we're doing. Right now, I'm excited to it's a little bit maybe boring, but we're working on internal processes to hyper speed up the zoning extraction to be able
Wow.
to do hundreds of cities and update those cities in real time.
Right.
So that's the one thing that we're all very excited about. And the other thing is we're now looking at data across cities, not just within cities. So being able to standardize zoning vocabulary across cities and being able to then do multi-city searches or compare census tracts across cities and be able to, especially for operations that are across different markets, to say, okay, these are the 3 areas across these 100 cities
Right.
where the most opportunity is in the next 5 years or the next 10 years. So we're doing very high level analysis, which is super exciting. And
Wow.
it's only because we've done the kind of groundwork to
Right.
populate every single parcel with all of its data. So then we can kind of rise above and look at high level analysis. And I think that that's going to also make us different than any potential competitor.
And for the viewers out there, will you and your company and your partners, will you be appearing at any of the major upcoming blockchain and tech conventions this year?
I hope so. That's those things happen almost last minute, but
Right,
yeah,
as often they do.
I
Yeah.
we want to really just learn from the great companies that are going and have conversations on how are we moving towards implementing blockchain and so yeah, absolutely, you'll probably find us there.
Good stuff. And if you can kind of summarize, what is your personal philosophy? I know we touched on a few things of, perseverance, and I would have to say, genuine deep faith and belief in what you're doing. But if you were to kind of like give one or two sentences that kind of sums up, let's say the Tao or the way of Olivia Ramos here. And by the way, because you're doing something that's very brave, it's very bold. What would you say to people as far as like kind of your inner compass and what it says?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is sounds a little crazy, but like I believe, and you see it in history, like ideas are put in our minds sometimes at the same time. And that's why you see technologies, even before there was communication across countries, being developed in
Right.
places where there's no way that they had a conversation. So I believe that, what we're doing is kind of has been given to us, has been
Yeah.
available to us. And my daily practice, I meditate over an hour a day,
Wow.
and I try to connect with that and kind of stay on course with what the impact we want to have and what we want to build and make sure that we're still kind of moving towards that north star
Right.
and I don't see this company as mine and the team feels the same way. This
That's
is kind
great.
of bigger than us. It's
Yeah.
going to happen with or without us. This is the way we move towards optimization of cities. We're very grateful and humbled to be part of it. And so if we keep that attitude and we continue to feel like we're being guided through our ideas and through our instincts, it's a pretty nice flow of events.
That's great. And I have to say, I think with what I've just heard right now, your beliefs, your philosophies, what you're working on, I think that these are the ideal ingredients for a successful team and for a successful company. So I have absolutely no doubts I'm going to be seeing more of deep blocks, taking up, perhaps the lion's share of coverage in this space, in the very, very near future. But listen, Olivia, thank you so
Thank you.
much for coming on today. This was very, very enlightening. And, for anybody in blockchain, and by the way, anybody who's in blockchain and real estate and looking to kind of simultaneously enter those two spaces at the same time, um, this episode alone should this has the subject matter to be taught at a university, Olivia, based on your explanations, so to say. So I think some of these more denser concepts, you summarize and articulated them very, very nicely and very smoothly. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what deepblocks is going to accomplish this year. And by the way, I'm going to try out the software tonight as well, because even somebody who's outside of real estate development, I look at this and I'm like, this is great. I've yet to see something that combines all these aspects of data when looking at a neighborhood, when looking at a municipality or a city, and putting it into really one place. So I'll be keeping a close eye on essentially the events as they unfold for you all this year. And listen, I look forward to keeping in touch with you. And if there's anything I can do on my end as well, please do ask. And I'd love to have you come back on in a few months as well, if you'd like. And we can
Absolutely.
we can pick up from this conversation and go further.
Thank you, Adam. I love your show. Thank you for having us on, and
Anytime.
I look forward to our next conversation.
You and me both. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.